Welcome back to a reading and correcting of Bottom Rung by me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. Today we are doing chapter 55. Tibs looked over the room with a water basin. He walked ahead until he reached where the essence trigger were and felt them move. Stay here, he told the others. Mel was now supporting most of Commodore's weight. Jekyll was limping heavily, and Kirina was pale. Tibbs couldn't sense what was wrong with her, and asked. She'd just said she'd overextended herself and needed rest. Still, he whispered, do you think this is fair? What do you mean? Tibbs indicated the path before him, and felt silly without someone there for him to see that they understood. The triggers are still there. Of course. That's the puzzle. But I solved it. We went through with only Jackal getting hurt. Did? How? The last slab crushed his foot. But he's walking. Oh, I see what you did. Although I don't understand how we did it. Still, the triggers. That's how the room is designed, Tibbs. So the room is here to kill us then? He asked, anger flaring. No, it's here for the team to figure out how to cross the path or how the ledge works. I know how to cross the path, Stowe. He stopped himself. His voice was getting louder, and he might say his name loud enough the others would hear. He wanted to respect the dungeon's wishes about that until he determined he didn't deserve the respect. This one is about waiting until both essence move in time to make a space large enough to pass through. The next one is just about waiting until it's the opposite side of where you're standing. The last one until you can pass under it. That's right. He looked up. Waited. He looked up. I don't know what you're waiting on, Still said. Look at my team. We know how to cross the path, but we can't do it because we're injured. How fair is that? Oh, don't even think about it, Kenny said. Tim's right, Kenny. There are rules, Stowe. You can't intervene in how a room works. You can't even make changes while they're in it. Tibbs turned back to the waiting cane. That's easily dealt with, Kenny, Stowe said. We need to leave the room, Tibbs told the others. Still, if they find out about this, we're going to be in so much trouble. Who's going to tell them? She didn't answer. Look, Tibbs made a good point. None of this is supposed to be about just killing them. You said so yourself when I started making the rooms. It's about testing and getting them to improve. This doesn't do either. They already know the trick, and what about trying to cross us injured leads to them improving. That's what the fighting's for. But you can't just turn it off because you're sweet on Tibbs. Still sighed. That's not why I'm doing it, and I'm not sweet on him. He's just the most entertaining of the runner. Tibbs, I'm going to turn them off this time, but I'm going to have something in place for the next one. I already have it ready for when the room resets. You're going to have to work for getting them to shut off on your next run. Oh, and do me a favor, don't tell that to that team who's helping you. They need to work it out too. Okay, he said, wondering how Stowe knew they were helping each other, then realized he could see everything they did, and they'd taken out the map Payan's team had drawn for them, even made alteration to it. He had to hope Tandy would be attentive. There would be enough changes from when they'd last gone in. She'd hopefully be looking for them, even in this room. As soon as they were outside, Stowe said the triggers were inactive. I'm a little disappointed you don't trust me, the dungeon said when Tibbs told his team to stay by the entrance while he checked. You're all about testing us. This could be another test. At least he doesn't let you being sweet on. I am not sweet on him. I'm a dungeon. He's human. That wouldn't even work. We need to get out more, Kenny. I would if I could, but the rules, I know. The path is clear, Tibbs called to the others, and they helped them, and then helped them across. How's your leg? He asked Jekyll. It hurts, but it's still in one piece and not crumbled and not crushed, so I'm not going to be complaining to. I'm keeping the complaining to a minimum. One thing, though, the thing you did to keep my leg together does something to my essence. I couldn't cope that part in Earth. Sorry, I didn't know that would happen. Jackal chuckled. I didn't know you could heal my leg, so that wasn't a complaint. I don't think it's healing. I'm pretty sure the bone is still broken. They're being held in place. Jackal stopped by the exit and turned to the room. Hi, Dungeon. He doesn't have to yell, Stowe replied. He's listening. Good fight. With a smile, the fighter exited the room. When Stowe didn't say anything, Tibs turned to follow. Thank you, Stowe finally said, a distinct catch in his voice. He says thank you, Tibs told Jackal once he caught up to him, and the fighter beamed. At the top of the stair, the room was dim and empty. I was expecting the golem to be there, Miss said, studying the space. Whipper, Tibs corrected. If you're going to name everything, you need to come up with better names, Kirina said. I'm not the one who names them. Crossed the room and studied the door. From this side, it was a plain slab of stone cut into the wall. He pushed on it, then put his shoulder against it. Thought he felt it move, or it was his feet sliding back. He turned and found his friends watching him. Are you going to help? Tibs asked. Do you need our help? Jackal replied, trying not to smile. Tibs rolled his eyes and stepped out of the way. Kirina took Kumdar from Maz, and the archer joined the fighter at the door, and they pushed. The door resisted, then, with a groan, opened and a scream was heard. With a curse, Jackal put more of his weight against it, and as soon as the gap was wide enough, Tibs slipped through. A girl a little older than Tibs was on her back, arm broken. She wore a grey robe of an Omega sorcerer. A stone bunny was flying at her, and Tibs flung a knife at it. It impaled on its sides, causing it to land next to the girl instead of on her. The bunny crumbled, leaving copper behind. Jasmine! Another girl in the entrance yelled. Tibs saw a broken bow in her hand, but focused on the two rats running in his direction. One jumped at the last of the distance, but before Tibs could slice it, air caught it and sent it tumbling away. The other Tibs happily got him too. You're not supposed to help them, Stowe said. Tibs stopped himself from replying. There were people he didn't know here. What was left of a team, the boy looked to be the oldest, a rogue by the knife he held. Are you okay? Tibs asked. Who are you? The archer asked, inching into the room toward the sorceress, who was still screaming, eyeing him wearily. He's Tibs, Jackal said. I'm Jackal, that's Kirina, Maz, and Kumdar. Are you guys planning on going in there? The fighter indicated the open door. No, Tibs said at the same time as Stowe and the rogue. They need to figure out how to open it themselves. Rabbit and Rat killed two of my friends, the boy retorted. I don't fucking care what's in there. This place is supposed to be fun. Who sold you that bug out of shit? Jackal asked. Dungeon's about pushing you harder than you want, so you'll get stronger. Couldn't have put it better myself, Stowe said. Look, Kirina cut the boy's reply off. I think the three of you should head out before us. No one said anything about teams running into each other, but I don't think they want us helping you. So, as thanks for saving her life, we'd appreciate it if you didn't mention us. We're going to wait a while before exiting. Leave it, the archer said, helping the sobbing sorceress toward the exit. They saved Jasmine's life. You saw what the rats did to Aaron. That rabbit was going to kill him. Let's just leave and go home. Don't get to hold this over my head, the boy said before turning and following the girl out. Someone's had a rough life, Ez said. Street, Jackal replied. Tibs didn't think so. They'd had to pay to come here, and he couldn't think of anyone living on the street being able. This is something that, being able to afford it, no matter how little it cost. I wasn't going to let them die, Tibs told Stowe. This is supposed to be to test them, the dungeon replied. It doesn't do that if they have help. Then move their way out so we don't run into them. I'm not going to let someone die just because it changes things for you. He does have a point, Kenny said. Actually, I'm surprised it took this long for one of the exiting team to run into one of the Omega teams. This team took longer to get here, Stowe replied. They stopped for a while after the second room. If they'd just kept going, they would have been done while Tibs was still convincing me to remove the trigger lines. Because that took so much work on his part, Kenny replied. Tibs, Jekyll replied, if I close the door and you unlock it, will there be a golem on the other side? Yes, Stu answered. Tibs glared at the fighter. What? Do you really want to fight one of those again? Karina asked. I am afraid I would be of no help, Kumdar asked. I can handle one of them on my own, the fighter said. You seem to forget Tibs had to split your leg after the last time you rushed one without support. Miss said, then you can cover me. Why do you even want to fight one again? Karina asked. Because once it's dead, there'll be a chest with loot. Mediocre loot? It's still loot, Jekyll replied, sounding like he couldn't believe they weren't interested. Tibbs nodded into the open door, and Karina made a sweeping gesture, hair trailing after. It slammed into the stone door and forced it shut. Yes, Jekyll said, rubbing his hand. Tibbs, your turn. Tibbs turned his back to the fighter and the door and headed for the exit. Tibbs, come on, be a friend and unlock it for me. There's loot on the other side. You can get it next time, he answered. Jekyll let out a sigh of relief as the cleric placed her hand on his leg. Tibbs watched incensed. Whatever his essence splint had done to interfere with Jekyll's essence, it didn't do to the cleric. Whatever his essence had done to interfere with Jekyll's essence, it didn't do to the cleric's. He could feel the flow of the essence straightening and flowing smoother in response to the bone healing fully, as well as the multiple other minor injuries the fighter had received in the dungeon. Unlike his splint, what the cleric did healed the entire person. Tibbs had felt it this time, since he was conscious, and his body had relaxed under the touch. It felt better overall, as if the cleric had cleansed not only his injuries, but his emotions too. Kamdar put up minor protestation, but gave in when the guards told him he wasn't proceeding until he was fully healed. The cleric still grumbled afterward about not having his wishes respected and how he'd worked too hard to live his life the way he wanted, forced to be healed when he didn't want to. While Karina tried to convince him it was better than the alternative, she at least sounded like she understood his plight. Jekyll had told the cleric to suck it up, as I said that things are the way they are, so there's no point complaining about it. Tibbs had stayed quiet because he had nothing useful to offer. At the table, they placed what they'd found, both in loot and coins, setting aside the amulet that had been in one of the chests, a set of 2 knives, and a staff. Tibbs kept his eyes on the items to keep from looking at the blinding essence standing behind the thin man seated on the other side of the table. Took one item after the other, studying it, then made a note in a book. Tibbs couldn't tell if there were letters or numbers, and when he looked at Karina, even she seemed puzzled. I've seen better, he said finally. I'd expect more of the team who managed to keep items from the guild. We did things by the rule, Jekyll said, and we're still doing them that way. He indicated the item. Well, that's what we're keeping. How much is it going to cost? You are keeping the better of what you found. I'm afraid that a hand slammed on the table next to the book, and another kept the man from jumping out of his chair. Do not lie, Harry growled. Jekyll cursed from a few feet away. Don't do that, Knuckles! Harry ignored him. Do you hear me, Gleason? The man swallowed and nodded. The stuff is imbued, but not enchanted. The knife are imbued with air. Someone of that element will have to study them to tell you more. The amulet has no essence in it. Hand them what the guild owes them, Harry instructed, and the man opened the metal box. He placed 8 silver and 11 coppers, then closed the box. When Harry didn't say anything, Jekyll grabbed the coins, combed out the staff, carrying out the amulet, As Tibbs reached for the knife, the seated man snorted. Those are useless to you. They're air imbued. They're knives. Tibs replied, taking them. I know how to use knives. He followed the other, sensing the way the air was imbued in the blade, trying to determine what they could do if he was careful. Everyone thinking he only had water was going to be very useful. And this concludes chapter 55 of Bottom Rung. If you are enjoying this, please subscribe, hit the bell, hit the thumbs up, and share. If you want to read the entire story, it is on Royal Road, and you can get there with the link in the notes. Along with that is the link to my Patreon, should you want to support me. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.